The cabin lights dimmed as Flight 247 cut through the clouds, cruising quietly over the Atlantic. Among the rows of tired travelers, one woman sat alone in seat 16A. Observant and oddly alert for someone on a long-haul flight. Most passengers saw just another traveler with headphones and a leather jacket. But when she looked out the window, her gaze wasn't casual. It was trained like someone used to reading the sky. No one on board knew her name. The boarding pass only said E. Carter. Yet, when two F-35 fighter jets appeared alongside the plane, their sleek silhouettes catching the sunlight, something unexpected happened. The lead pilot looked toward her window, tilted his jet, and raised his hand in a sharp, deliberate salute. A second later, his co-pilot followed. The entire cabin gasped, unsure if it was a coincidence or something more. The woman in 16A didn't flinch. She simply nodded, a faint smile crossing her face, the kind of smile that carried secrets. The flight attendant nearby noticed her knuckles tighten around a small patch sewn inside her sleeve, a faded insignia from a unit most civilians had never heard of. Who was she? Why were elite F-35 pilots saluting a passenger midair? And what call sign could make combat aviators break formation to honor her from the sky? As the engines roared on and whispers spread through the cabin, one thing was clear. Seat 16A was hiding a story the world wasn't ready for. The cabin was buzzing with quiet speculation. Some passengers thought it was a routine escort. Others believed it was a training exercise. But no one could explain why both F-35 pilots had saluted at the exact same window. The woman in seat 16A remained still, her eyes tracing the jets until they disappeared into the horizon. She didn't look surprised, more like someone who'd seen this kind of sky greeting before. A young man sitting across the aisle couldn't hold his curiosity any longer. "Did you see that? They were saluting you," he whispered, half laughing, half nervous. She turned to him with a polite smile. "Maybe they were just saying hello," she replied softly, her tone calm. But her voice carried a weight that didn't match her simple words. Moments later, turbulence rattled the plane. The captain's voice came through the speakers, steady but tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're adjusting course due to military activity nearby." Passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Military activity. At this altitude, E. Carter glanced down at her wrist, a small scar just above her pulse, and a faded watch with the symbol scratched into its back. Valkyrie 1. It wasn't a name most people recognized, but those who did knew it belonged to one of the most respected call signs in aerial combat history. She took a deep breath, leaning back as if waiting for something or someone. Outside the window, a faint silhouette reappeared in the distance. Closing in fast, the distant silhouette grew larger, glinting under the sun until it was clear. It was the same F-35 that had saluted earlier, now returning alone. The passengers stirred uneasily as it drew closer, flying parallel to the airliner, its pilot visible through the canopy. The woman in seat 16A straightened, her calm expression giving way to something sharper. "Focus." The flight attendants tried to reassure everyone, though their voices trembled. "It's nothing to worry about, folks. Just standard procedure," one said, forcing a smile. But E. Carter knew better. Standard procedure didn't involve an F-35 breaking formation to shadow a commercial jet. Through the glass, the pilot raised his visor. Even from that distance, she recognized him. Lieutenant Hale. The name alone sent a flicker of memory across her face. Years ago, they had flown missions together, ones that never made it into any report. She'd been Valkyrie 1, his commanding officer. Before vanishing from every record after a classified operation went wrong, Hale's jet rocked its wings. A silent signal between pilots. He was warning her. But warning her about what? Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the airline captain received a coded message from air traffic control. Passenger identified as priority alert. Maintain current altitude. Await further instructions. He frowned, reading the name twice. E. Carter. Back in 16A, she reached for the overhead bin and discreetly pulled down a small black case, its edges worn and military shoe. Whatever she was running from, it had just found her, 30,000 feet above the ocean. The air inside the cabin grew heavier, every passenger sensing that something was wrong, even if they couldn't explain it. The jet outside was still there, matching their speed perfectly. E. Carter's grip on the black case tightened as the plane's intercom crackled again. The captain's voice, once steady, now carried a trace of unease. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm and seated. We're making a brief diversion." The woman in 16A knew that tone. It wasn't a diversion. It was containment. Her eyes flicked toward the clouds ahead, where another faint shape appeared. Not one, but two more aircraft, closing in fast. They weren't escorting, they were intercepting. She quietly unlatched the case, revealing a small, encrypted transmitter and a silver badge marked with a crest most people wouldn't recognize. The insignia of an elite aerial defense unit that had been officially disbanded years ago. The young man beside her caught a glimpse of it and froze. "Who are you?" he whispered. She met his eyes and said softly, "Someone who is never supposed to fly commercial again." A sudden jolt shook the aircraft as warning lights blinked in the cockpit. The co-pilot turned pale. Their systems were being jammed. Through the window, the lead F-35 tilted its wing again, flashing a coded light pattern, the old Valkyrie signal for abort and prepare. E. Carter's pulse quickened. The past she buried was no longer behind her. Whatever had begun years ago in classified skies was about to resurface right here. Mid-air dot. Before anyone could react, the cabin lights flickered, and the engines gave a low shudder. The passengers gasped as the plane suddenly dipped, leveling again, only after a brief but stomach-turning drop. E. Carter glanced toward the cockpit. That jamming signal wasn't just external interference. Someone on board was transmitting it. She scanned the rows quickly, her instincts kicking in. A man near the back of the cabin caught her attention, calm, wearing a headset that didn't belong to any passenger. He wasn't panicking like the rest. The moment their eyes met, his hand slid toward his jacket pocket. That was all she needed to. Carter quietly stood, pretending to reach for the restroom, her black case still in hand. The young man beside her whispered, "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. "Stay low," was all she said before slipping into the aisle. Outside, the F-35's shifted formation. Lieutenant Hale's voice came faintly through the pilot's radio. "Flight 247, your transponder's compromised. You've got a signal leak from inside." The captain's face went pale. Inside the plane? E. Carter moved closer to the suspicious passenger, every step measured. Then the second twist hit. The man wasn't alone. Two more passengers subtly stood, positioned on opposite aisles, perfectly coordinated. They weren't reacting to the chaos. They were waiting for a signal. Her heart pounded. This wasn't a coincidence. The salute, the jamming, the diversion, it was all connected. And E. Carter realized, too late, that she wasn't being hunted. She'd been lured. E. Carter froze in the aisle as the three figures subtly adjusted their stance, their eyes fixed on her. The cabin had gone eerily quiet, the hum of the engines mixing with the pounding of her pulse. She placed the black case on the seat beside her and spoke calmly. "You don't have to do this." The man in the back smiled faintly. "You left a lot of loose ends." Valkyrie, hearing her old call sign spoken aloud, after years in silence, sent a chill through her. Before he could move, a sharp command came through the aircraft's intercom, not from the captain, but a scrambled voice from the military channel. "Eagle Command to Flight 247. Authorization granted. Proceed." At that instant, the F-35 outside dropped altitude, aligning directly below them. The entire plane rattled as a flash of light from below lit up the clouds, a precision EMP pulse. The cabin went dark, the air filled with gasps and alarms. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the three operatives were on the floor, their devices fried. E. Carter stood over them, clutching the silver badge, breathing hard. The EMP had neutralized the threat, but it also exposed everything. Hale's voice broke through the static. "Valkyrie, your cover's gone. Extraction, en route." She exhaled slowly, relief and regret mixing in her eyes. The young man beside her whispered, "You're really one of them, aren't you?" She nodded faintly, gazing out the window as a military transport rose through the clouds below. The blinking signal faded, and for a long moment, E. Carter just sat in silence, her reflection flickering against the window. The clouds outside looked peaceful again, hiding the chaos that had just unfolded above them. The captain's voice came through the intercom, shaky but steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything is under control. We'll be landing safely shortly." Passengers slowly began to relax, though most still glanced toward 16A, whispering about what they'd seen but couldn't. Under STANDE, Carter finally closed the transmitter and slipped the silver badge back into her pocket. She turned to the young man beside her, who was still trying to process everything. "You didn't see anything," she said softly, but with a small, genuine smile. He nodded, knowing he wouldn't forget it no matter how hard he tried. As the plane descended, the F-35 jet stayed close, guiding them through the final stretch. When they broke through the clouds, the sunrise spilled across the horizon, warm, steady, and calm. For the first time in years, E. Carter let herself breathe. The life she'd buried had found her again, but this time, she wasn't running from it. After landing, she slipped away quietly before the news crews arrived, blending into the crowd like she had so many times before. Somewhere above, another jet streaked across the morning sky, tilting its wings once in salute. Seat 16A was empty now, but the legend of Valkyrie lived on, carried by the wind and those who saw her that day.